אז ברוכים הבאים, יש לנו פה את הכבוד, היום I'll move into English in a second, את הכבוד עם כמה אנשים שפה, יש לנו קודם כל את האמבסדור דוקטור רלף קינג, the ambassador of Australia in Israel. We have רקפת רוסק אמינח, she's the managing partner in Teammate. And many other things. And we, of course, have the honor to host here with us Sir Frank Lowy, which is a legend in Australia, but also a legend globally. And I'm so honored that you're here. And when I first heard that he did Aliyah to Israel a few years ago, I was like, wow, I was so shocked. And I think that's the reaction of so many Israelis here. So I'll not tell all the biography of Sir Frank Lowy, but I'll just tell you a little bit the background and we'll start from there, okay? So he was born in Czechoslovakia in 1930. He moved to Budapest. He survived the Holocaust. His father was murdered in Auschwitz. After the World War II, he moved to Israel, joined Haganah, and then moved to Golani, so he's a Golanchik, right? And fought the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Then he moved to Australia to reconnect with his mother and the rest of the family. In 1952, he started with a small delicatessen. In 1960, he co-founded Westfield, became the empire that had total assets that you all read, $29 billion. He sold Westfield in 2018. And the most important thing, he moved to Israel in 2018. But he's an amazing person, philanthropist, big supporter of Israel, big Zionist, and it's in the blood of all the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. I'm always pleased to be with young people. Of course, I can be called many things except young. So I enjoy the young people because they create life, create business, create. Of course, that is very exciting to me. Well, I have attained an age where I don't need to create anymore. But I still have ambition to do something if it is worthwhile.
Like this one.
Like this one. I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be with young people. I'm pleased to see the ambassador here because Australia has really given me tremendous lot. I came to Australia in 1952 as an immigrant. To join my family that I've been separated from before, and I made a very successful home. I married there a beautiful young lady who unfortunately passed away some time ago, my wife, and created a family of 3 boys, very strong, active boys, family, Jewish, Australian, good people. And I'm very fortunate that they come and visit me and spend a little time with me so I can be part of them. My job these days is to agree with what they do.
And
it's not a joke, it's a reality. But sometimes if I try to put my finger up, oops, it has to come down. But no, not really. I enjoy and cherish their capacity as young people. I mean young. My oldest son is 70 years old. Wow. So how young can you be? Just like I'm 94, how old can you be? So but the question of age doesn't impress me in either direction because I don't act my age. I don't act my age now. And I didn't act my age when I was young. When I was 20 odd years old, maybe 21 or 22, I already became a businessman. Not a big businessman, but a delicatessen owner. And I didn't think that I'm too young. And now I don't think I'm too old. Although the fact is the fact. But I do not look at myself as an old man, because I don't believe I am aged, but I'm not old, because I am very interested in life. I have lots of young people. I don't have other old people that are in their 90s. Just as well, they're boring, you know. And I try not to be. So I'm interested in life. I'm very pleased to be here. Rakefet and I are very close friends, and she asked me to come and talk to you young people. I don't know what I can tell you that you don't know, but I'll be happy to share some of my life issues with you. I hope that there will be something that you may get out of it that will be to the advantage of your own life.
There will be many. Let Yuval ask you the specific questions, and you will see they will take it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's a lot. I think that for the last few days I was exploring and reading, and you know, one of the things you mentioned that you were born for the third time in Israel. Can you tell us a little bit more? What did you mean the third time that you were born when you moved to Israel recently?
Well, I was reborn when I moved to Israel. I mean, I was I think 87 when I came back the last time, even though I have never left Israel, because I was traveling in my business a lot, and there was not a year that I didn't spend in Israel sometime, and I made lots of friends during my visits. I also have a privilege. I have a little boat on the Mediterranean sometimes, and I invited my friends from Israel to join me. So I was never a stranger here, and I'm not a stranger now. And I'm here because I think I have achieved most what I could achieve, and I have come to enjoy the freedom, the knowledge of Israel, to be part of a young country, and to do whatever I can to improve myself and my family, to be part of this dynamic country. I'm just I don't really want to make a speech, but I need to tell us that I listen to podcasts. I listen to the podcast of what the Israeli army has done in Syria. If you haven't, you ought to listen to it, because there is so much in that podcast of impossible things that the Israeli army has achieved. What we need to do as Israelis, to translate it into our private lives, to be able to enrich this country more than what it is now. I mean, I can tell you the name of the podcast is Call Me Back, I think, Seymour. And they described in detail what has the Israeli army done in Syria. It's worthwhile to listen to that. But now I pass it on to you for questions.
So
otherwise, I'll occupy the whole night.
No. I think that, you know, talking about your childhood, you know, losing your father in a young age, moving by yourself to Israel, how did this shape Frank as a person, and also how did it shape you as a business person?
Well, I don't know the business part, but the loss of my father, the disappearance of my father, has shaken me all my life. And it took 45 years before I found out what happened to him. But I won't go into that now because it's a non-story. I don't want to be here to be sad, it's easy to find that out. And that has shaped my life. The loss of my father, the love of my mother, and being part of my family with my two brothers and a sister, after the war. And then I came here as a young man, a boy. I wasn't 16 yet before I arrived. And the trip from Europe to Israel was, of course, not simple. It was an illegal trip. And we got caught by the British Navy. I was the guest of the Queen for 6 months or so in Cyprus. And, pardon? I'm sorry? What ship? Yagur. It was the first ship that was caught in the net of the British Navy to stop Jews coming to Israel. So it was a traumatic experience, but it didn't lessen my interest to come. And I arrived here when I was 16. I joined a youth camp, youth area that the Sochnut has provided for immigrant boys. And from there, I joined the army when I was 17. And I found myself in Golani by some circumstances. And then...
Frank, I want to disturb and ask you,
Please.
even though we are not going to discuss and talk about Holocaust today, I know, but I still want you to tell them the story of the Swiss embassy, how you saved your mom and yourself, because I think that this story shows, like, when I heard this story, I actually understood your whole success story. So I think it's important.
Okay. Well, we turn ourselves into 1944. March 1944, the Germans occupied Hungary, Budapest, other than just being an ally. And with that, the persecution of Jews has reached its height. And we were together. Father wasn't there anymore, he disappeared. We were there together, mother, a brother and a sister. And one brother was in a work camp in Ukraine, helping the Hungarian army. So there were mother, sister, brother, and I, 4 of us. Had a reasonable apartment in Budapest. But we had to leave that because Jews could not live in that area. So we had a choice of going into a ghetto or being deported to Poland or Germany, which neither of us wanted. I was a little boy, I was 13 years old, so I was a bit of a schlepper to the rest of my family. And they decided to buy false papers, and we became Hungarians. My brother went to work in a garage. My sister went to work in a ladies' clothing shop. And mother and I were left alone. And my mother got a job as a housekeeper in a Hungarian family, and I was her illegitimate child. So, father is gone, brother is in Ukraine, so times were terrible. Nevertheless, life makes you want to live. So we saved ourselves that way. And then, there's a little story of Jewishness here. One Friday afternoon, I come home from somewhere and go into our little room where mother and I were when she was the housekeeper, Friday afternoon, and I go into the room, and what do I see? I see my mother lighting Shabbat candles. So I got horrified. I said, Mother, what are you doing? Somebody opens the door and we become history. So she quietened me down and she told me, as long as I live and I have an opportunity to light candles, Shabbat candles, I will always do so. While we were there, I was roaming the streets a lot because we had really no home, and I heard that the Swiss embassy is giving out protective passports to Jews so they can be saved from the atrocities of the Hungarian Nazis. So I found out where the Swiss embassy is. Of course, everything was by foot. There were no public transport or taxis. Anyway, I didn't have money for a taxi anyway. So I found where the Swiss embassy was. I go to the Swiss embassy by foot, and I see 5,000 Jews or 2,000 Jews couldn't get to the building. So I said to myself, how the hell am I going to get a passport from this building if I can't get into it? So suddenly I remembered that on the way to the embassy, I saw a store that was renting theatrical clothes. Didn't mean anything to me then, but suddenly I thought, I'll go back, maybe I find something. So it was about 5 minutes walk back. So I found the theatrical clothes, and I go in there, and I see a uniform of a telegram boy. I mean, I'm sure that none of you have experienced it, but telegrams in those days were sent out by telegram boys, that the post office got the telegram from wherever, and then boys were waiting. Their telegram boys took the telegrams and they had a uniform. So I saw a uniform, I hired the uniform and put it on, and I took with me a piece of paper. I don't know why, but I did. So I go back to the place, and what do I see? In Yiddish they say, Schwarz in the Augen, darkness in your eye from people. I said, how am I going to get in there? So I said to the people, I have a telegram for the ambassador and I have to get in. So somehow or other, I pushed myself, I shoved myself, some people led me the door, and I finished up at the Consul General. They opened the door, of course they let me in, and there I got a passport for me and my mother that we are under the protection of the Swiss government.
Do you believe he was 13 years old? This was the story. Now you can go back to Australia. I just wanted this story because I think this story shows.
Yeah. But let me also tell you, I ran to Mother where she was, and I said, Mother, we are saved. This passport, and we'll be saved. And in fact, it entitled us to go to an international ghetto, not to the big ghetto that was in Budapest, because we had that passport. So the point you wanted to make, that I don't like to praise myself, even though I'm very proud what I did, but
No, I think that the point, I think that especially here with founders that also need to do lots of stuff to get into the, to the right investor, the right client, and so on. But talking about your mother, you mentioned her a lot, and one of the things that I got really connected is that she was keep telling you this principle of when you have a little, give a little, when you have a lot, give a lot, and it's really stood out to me. If you can share, because I think that it's something that we all need to remember, that we can always give.
Thank you, but I just finished that little story.
Okay.
That little story that Rakef had wanted me to mention to you, because apparently everybody tells me that this was the beginning of my entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got the idea, well, actually, if I think about it, I got the idea somewhere in the circumstances, and I followed my instinct, and I did what I did, and it was a life-saving step. And people interpret that action of mine at the age of 13 to the successful life that I have led since then. I don't attribute this to myself like that, but other people do.
So I think that if I'll connect it to the instinct, because you said like,
yes.
you follow your instinct, in many business decisions that you make. But I think that we all want to follow our instinct, but it's still, we always think, okay, maybe I should do more research, maybe I should consult, maybe I should use Gemini, our AI tools to ask and so on. But I think that. Yeah, advertising. But part of your thing is like how you follow the instinct, and this is just one example, right? In the business, you had lots of other examples of following your instinct.
I have quite a few other examples that I rely on my instinct and I rely on my judgment. And often I don't see the end of the road, but I see the road that will take me there. I had a delicatessen shop with a partner in a place called Blacktown, was a western suburb of Sydney, and it was very busy with immigrants because many of the immigrants that came to Sydney and Australia finished up in the western suburb. So it became a big real estate boom in that area. One afternoon, I'm standing in my delicatessen shop looking at the window, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And I see a young man that I knew from Sydney, and I ask him, what are you doing here so far from Sydney? Oh, he says, we are building a couple of shops around the corner to sell and to rent. Oh, I said, that's interesting. So I go back to the store. I had a partner, and I said to him, John, I just saw Irving Graff, that was his name, outside here, and he tells me he's building shops. If he can build shops, why can't we build shops? So that was actually the beginning of the Westfield Empire. I mean, it's a bit of a far stretch to take there, but we did find 2 or 3 sites next to our shop where it was, and we built those 3 or 4 shops, and we made good money. Meanwhile, we sold the delicatessen, and I also had a coffee shop next to it, and that gave us the capital to go into real estate. Also, next to those 2 or 3 shops, there was another piece of land which was owned by the owner of our delicatessen shop that we rented from. Must be about 3, 4, maybe 5 acres of land. And we decided to buy it and read about shopping centers in America and knew one shopping center that was built in Australia. So he and I, he was a bit older than me, a bit slower than me, but that's a bit of a dig. Anyway, and I said, well, why don't we build a shopping center here? So I was in Australia from Israel in 1952. In 1959, in August 1959, we built a small shopping center with parking for 30 cars and about 20 shops and a small department store. I mean, the instinct to follow myself was always there. It's still there, and I think that's what made me where I am, so that I think of something, I see something, I envisage something, and that becomes a reality. Of course, it's not as easily as one sentence, but at the same time, you need to be determined, perseverance, and have some kind of vision. And of course, I was not alone. I had a very good partner. He was a little bit older than me. So we have developed a real estate business in that area until one gentleman, and also an immigrant way back from Australia, from Hungary, invested money with us. And we made subdivisional land and bought a couple of more places. And then he said to me, he called us boys. How old was I? What year was it? 52, 53, 24, 25. He said, why don't, he was the head of a public company in textiles. He says, you need money all the time. I can introduce you to a stockbroker that you can be part of a public company. So, of course, I grabbed it with both my arms and both my body. My partner was a little bit less aggressive. He was a bit older, but I was able to convince him that this is a good thing. So, a year later, a public company was listed as Westfield Development Corporation in the Sydney Stock Exchange with $75,000 capital.
I just want to remind all of you something that you probably don't know. That Frank has only 5 or 6 years of education. So actually one of the things I always asked him, how come you had a public company before the age of 30 while you didn't understand anything about anything? And also, you should remember that when he came to Australia at the age of 21, he didn't even know English. So he didn't know any English, no education. And he had a public company before the age of 30. So the whole thing is just like, cannot even understand how it's together.
Well, I can't explain it to you, but apparently, you know, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. You know, you see me here, I'm a reasonably well-to-do man. I have a beautiful family, and I did come back to Israel because I'm a Zionist from the beginning, and my family home was also a Zionist, religious Zionist, and I came back here not because I didn't like Australia. There was nothing wrong for me in Australia. On the contrary, Australia welcomed me at the time when I went to join my family, and they used to call us then New Australians. I took it as an endearment, and I've got this ambassador here, and I'm glad to tell you that. That was an endearment for Australia, New Australians. I went to work in a factory, and nobody asked me what am I Jewish, am I Hungarian, what am I? They just took me in as an immigrant, and I was welcomed. And later on, I thrived in that environment. Of course, you know, I don't give myself compliments, but I must have done certain things well to be here and to achieve all this achievement that I have. And I put it down to my curiosity, my hard work, and be with people that can work with me, or I can work with them. I have a very good record of people to work with people. I mean, the public company, I was chairman for, 50 years and or 40 years, and many of the executives, including my 3 sons, were working for the company 20, 30 or 40 years.
So regarding this, you know, a lot of the founders here are starting the business in terms of building culture, and you managed to build such a successful company, but also each one of your sons had a big part, but also a lot of executives. What do you think really built this culture? Is it the vision, the mission? What do you think that really got them together and working for you for so long?
Well, look,
thinking about just the beginning of the journey here.
First of all, I was never satisfied where I was. My mission, my vision, my will is to make forward steps in life. Of course, you can't do that alone. I had a good partner, and people, I mean, of course, I had my sons later on, but I was already in big business. I have an instinct to find and keep good people. How do I do that? Firstly, I make a judgment, and then I back up my judgment. And when I had the company, I think must have been at least 25, 30 people, which was the core of the company, that were there practically from the beginning. Not so much totally from the beginning, because when you have a small business, small company, you need different talent when you have a public company of some note. So you have to employ and be with people with experience. So it wasn't unusual that if I can tell you the top 25 people, including a secretary of mine, were with me for 35 years. And I trusted them. And I picked them, and I trusted them, and I let them do their job. Not telling them what to do, but learning from them. Because everybody in my company was more educated than me. Fact of life, anyway.
So you didn't micromanage them?
No micromanage them. I gave them a task. I gave them a guidance. They knew where we want to be. We wanted to be the top real estate company in Australia. And we did become, not only in Australia, but we were, at one time, Westfield owned 150 malls throughout America, England, and Australia. It was some undertaking. So you needed and you wanted people that you could trust. As it happened, I had 3 sons. They all went to work for somebody else, and then they became working for Westfield. One son was in Los Angeles, another one went to work for a bank in New York, and the third one, I'm not quite sure where it went, but he was not working for me. So they had to learn what took outside. So the core of the business became the 4 of us. And it expanded continually and all the time, with finding young executives some from other businesses, some from the real estate business, and there must have been 25 to 30 core people that did the job, and they were reliable. They went to Los Angeles. One of the sons went, but he was a junior, so there was a senior person with him for quite a little while until he has become independent and could do the job. And the example was that I do have talent for picking people and friends, by the way.
And one of the things that you describe yourself as curious, but also paranoid, and also optimistic. How does it work together?
Well, one supports the other.
Okay.
You can be a pessimist and everything is black, schwarz. Or the same thing is maybe pink. You imagine that it's pink. It doesn't have to be pink, but you don't take it as black. And if you say something, I always tried to be better myself all the time. I was never satisfied with my own
progress
or my own contribution. Although, of course, I did well. Only between us. Don't tell anybody else. I did well. It's not an easy relationship to be a father to 3 intelligent, educated young men, sons. But I relied on them. For instance, I'll give you one example. One of the sons came to me after 20 years or so. I said, Dad, I don't want to be here in this big company. I want to be on my own to do something. So I converted some of the shareholding I had into cash, quite a reasonable sum by then, and I gave it to him to manage. I never went back to him to ask him how is he doing. You know, I mean, this was, I trusted him, and he knew I trusted him, and that made him do the job. This is only one example, because I appointed many people they started as young people with me, and they were there for over a long period of time. And they were all better educated than me. Well, that wasn't very hard, by the way. But they were educated, they were engineers, they were architects, they were accountants, they were lawyers, which I knew nothing about those professions. But God gave me something, including my parents gave me something that I within me that made me to be what I am. Because I didn't learn it in school, but I had a wonderful example from my home, my mother and father. You know, I won't go there because the story will be sad. But
I want to disturb and ask you to share with us some tough moments, because these people here are all in their entrepreneurial journey, just like you were. And as you can imagine, and as you hear from me about our startups at Teammate, we all hit the wall here and there, and it's not that rare. So please share with us some tough moments where you were very leveraged, or with the broadcasting thing, or whatever you choose, just to show and make sure that they understand that this was not just a very nice, smooth journey that brought you to a company that was worth billions.
I'm happy to talk about it and to tell you, particularly you are starting up, you will have many difficult experiences, and you'll have to make decisions to get them on the right way, or change ways, or step out, change direction, or whatever else you need to do.
Call it pivot.
Pivot. Okay, well, I've pivoted all my life. I still pivot. Look, I'll just give you a little example. I'm 94 years old, going on 95, and I don't consider myself too old.
You look 80, not a year more than 80.
But I tell you something, I didn't consider myself young when I started business. I was 22 years old. And I didn't say to myself, oh, you're too young. Well, no, I don't say myself I'm too old. You know, it's the same vein in me that I confront things as they are. Not as I wish them to be, but as they are. I mean, Rakefet asked me to mention I'll mention to you a couple of things that were very hard for me to swallow. I had an opportunity in the 80s or 90s to expand my business activity into television. I knew Rupert Murdoch, and he had to sell his Australian television business. And I had a friend that knew Murdoch. I got connections to him, and he did me a favor. He sold me the Australian chain of television business to me, and I formed a public company to contain it. We both talked to a high-level executive in the television business before I made the deal was made, and we expected him. It was in partnership with Rupert. He was 25%, I was 75%. Unusually with Rupert, but that's what was. And the day before we signed up, or the day we signed up, the executive changed his mind and didn't join me. There I was, as clever as I was, as ambitious I was, something I knew nothing about. It was a big undertaking. The company paid $750 million then for the Australian television business. And there I was. What am I going to do now? I hired an American executive who was no good. To cut the long story short, I also got one of my sons to come with me, and it was a total disaster. Total disaster. And one day I woke up that I have to close it, I have to do something about it. So I commissioned a banker and a lawyer. He said, you got to get me out of this somehow. So they found a buyer which was willing to take the business over, provided I put $200 million cash into the business. Well, I did not hesitate for one moment that I got out of it that way. The night that the deal was done at 4 o'clock in the morning, I went home like I was walking on eggs because I felt relieved. Fortunately, I had the cash to pay it. I did not want to, I didn't worry about the shareholders because the shareholders invest money and they take a risk, but was able to pay back the debtors. And this gentleman who bought it took the business away. He got a business for nothing. I mean, it was a major step in my life to make that decision. I didn't know at the time how major it is. The alternative was to go broke. Now I tell you a little story from my past. I remember my father. He was not a successful businessman. And during the period of 29 was a big economic disaster. Many small people, or even big people, went broke at the time. And everybody folded up and broke. And my father did not. He sold his house. He sold his house to pay his debts. And people asked him, why do you do it, Hugo? He said, and I remember it as a child. He said, a pane of window is there, you can see through it. Once you throw a stone and break it, you can never put it together. And that was the picture in front of me, that I was not ready to go broke. I mean, $200 million was a lot of money, but fortunately I had it. And it was one of the happiest days of my life when I was no longer in the television business.
And I will ask something before we'll open for questions from the audience. You mentioned that there is no room for ego in life. And I feel like, you've been around with so many successful people. You are super successful, but you're still so humble.
Well, I think maybe it's where I come from. My father, my mother were humble people. And I think I inherited that from them. But beside that, I can't stand show-off people. Not one friend of mine is a show-off. So how can I stand I have to look in the mirror, And you see the mirror, I don't want to see some idiot show off. Look at me. I mean, I'm being a bit descriptive. But the fact is, my mother was a humble person. My father was a humble person. And being a show-off, a Schwitzer, is just foreign to me.
The ambassador wants to ask something.
Yes.
So Frank, first, thank you, Yuval, for having me. And your name and your family's name are bywords for business acumen in Australia.
Yeah.
and here. You've spoken of your optimism, of your resilience in the sense of failure. Do you think optimism is something that can be learned? Do you have innate optimism? And what's the balance between optimism and grit, sheer resilience?
Well, I think if you ask me the question, I didn't think about it. But optimism is you want to move forward. You don't want to be stuck in one place. I mean, I was in business from a very young man. And as I said, I was never satisfied with my position. Not that I was miserable, but I wasn't satisfied. I was ambitious, and I wanted to grow. So that being unsatisfied, the wrong word, but I can't find, it's not my native tongue, you know. It's an ambition that I had to be better. I had no chance to be a better student because I didn't go to school. I mean, when I was born, it was Czechoslovakia. Without me moving one step, I became a Hungarian. Then the Nazis came. Then the war came. Then I came to Palestine. When did I have time to go to school, so to speak? But I didn't miss the school. Actually, I don't think I would have been a very good student because I always was looking further ahead. And I mean, as a young boy, I wanted to go to Palestine because that was the, you know, for after the war, all the drama, the loss of my father, I still miss him. 80 years later, I still miss him. Excuse me, please. But basically, ambition is a dissatisfaction of being dissatisfied. I mean, this is a new sentence I found.
Yeah, it's a good sentence. It's a good one.
But I want to interpret to you that the humbleness is a quality that you inherit, learn from other people. You see Schweizers and you like them, you want to be a Schweitzer. You see a humble person, a learned, humble person, it's much nicer to be humble. I think one of the things when we talked about the television, I learned there were two disasters in my view. One was financial, the other one was reputational. I just told you about the television business, and I told you how I finished with it. Why did I do it that way? I had a very good advisor, and the day the television news broke, I said to him, what do I do now? He says, Frank, I know a very serious journalist. He'll come and interview you, but you have to admit what mistakes you have made. And I took it to heart. And in fact, after the interview, any hostility that would have been disappeared. I had one of the bad experiences in life. I was the chairman of Football Federation of Australia. I was very ambitious for Australia to host the World Cup football. So Kevin Rudd was the Prime Minister, and I went to see him. Kevin, you fund me and I will try and get the World Cup of Australia, of football here. So without me asking much, he said, he gave me $45 million. And I believe that I can do the job. I met the most lying, vicious people in the world, in my life, in the sporting world. They promised me the world. I had a very good assistant. I got myself Australia to become a member of the Asian Confederation because I would have had a better chance to get that. It was a feat by itself. But anyway, I achieved that, and it was very successful. Also put the Australian football on the map, more international than it was before. I traveled every country in the world, and I got promises everywhere. And I've never seen more dishonest people in my whole life. The whole FIFA is a cest of lying bastards. They're not even nice people, you know, because many liars are nice. You know?
They're not so humble.
They're not humble. They're unbelievable. Yet, I was and I'm a serious businessman, a realistic businessman. But somehow, I led myself to believe that I can do it. I wanted Australia to have the World Cup. And I worked very hard. I traveled the world. And of course, the world knows now, if you follow that part of the world, that I didn't succeed. Qatar succeeded. Why? Because Qatar made a deal with the French Prime Minister, who was corrupt himself, to make a deal between the two countries, and that's how they organized the World Cup. And of course, everybody fell in line. I've never seen a more dishonest people, cheaters in the world. What's more, it was announced who was the winner, but they didn't announce who was the loser. Out of 40 votes, I got 1 vote. It was an unbelievable disaster for me. A public shame. You know, firstly, I was accused of spending 45 million of the Australian government's money. And the other one, of course, I didn't succeed. So I was flying back home. And I said, well, what am I going to do now? The newspapers were waiting for me, at least 50, when I arrived at the airport. And I held a press conference. And they were looking for the blood of the chief executive. I was the chairman. And I opened up and I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is my fault. The press gallery got silent. There was not one nasty question, you know. And the whole thing got forgotten. The only person who remembers this disaster is me. Because it hurt me so much that I was so naive, it didn't cost me a penny. But money is, you know, if I can be bold, if you have money, it's just money, it's not the world, you know. There are lots of other things than money and wealth and so on. And I was very hurt. And I remembered the television business. And I stood up. I said, ladies and gentlemen, the fault is mine why we did not get the World Cup to Australia. And in the end, when I could...
Yeah, so I'll just, because we don't have a lot of time, but one thing, you know, you talk about a lot of things, about being humble, about your, you know, listening to your instincts, staying optimistic, paranoid. What is the one piece of advice, you know, you hope you would have received, and you can share it with a group of founders here?
Well, I think you have to be honest. But you have to be honest with yourself. That's where it starts. That you don't fool yourself into something that you are not. Because then you won't disappoint other people. On the contrary, you'll be valued more. I think that's the most important ingredient that I can tell you. Of course, I can think of quite a few others, but that's the most important thing, that you are honest to yourself.
But you don't feel that sometimes, you know, being honest to yourself is one thing, but as a founder, the CEO, you have to tell stories, right? Well,
you try not to lie.
Yeah, no, that for sure. Rakefet probably know that also from founders. You have to tell a story on the border, right?
I don't say I never lie, but I try not to lie. Actually, it hurts me to say a lie. Occasionally, of course.
You know, the high-tech war, we say,
What's that?
fake it till we make it. We don't lie.
We don't lie.
Fake it till we make it. This is
That's
what they say.
Yeah, I say what they say. It's okay. That's also a good say. But you have to lie. But you cannot lie to yourself, because then you are a fool.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So I don't know where I learned all this from, but obviously life has taught me. I come from a good home, a very Jewish home, not rich home. We were not poor, but we were just being, you know. And I carry with me the Holocaust. All my life, I will take it to the grave, because I pain so much all my life being without a father, a good father. Of course, every father is a good father, but mine was good for me, and disappeared from the end of the earth. He left to the railway station to take his family away from the disaster, and never came back. I'm sorry, but I'm sitting here with you. If I'm telling you things, this is the one thing, is me. I cannot escape it, and I don't want to escape it. But ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to finish on a sad note. I had a very good life. As you know, I have 3 very good sons. I had a wife that loved me to the end of the earth. And the mother did the same. And I think these 2 women gave me what I have. And that's what I am. And I'm happy about it. I feel it, and I am it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.